how do you feel like the situation in Palestine was different this year, distinctly different than the years before?
The situation in Palestine has always been heated. Clashes between Israeli occupation forces and Palestinian protesters are actually the norm in Palestine. But 2018 was, to some extent, exceptional in the way that Palestinians exhibited their will to seek their national rights. By the month of March, almost, I would say hundreds of thousands of Palestinians started staging one of the largest unarmed civil protests in their national history. It started in Gaza. It still continues up till today. We are talking about 40 weeks of protests that involve people of all sorts of backgrounds. They all demand return to their homelands and end of the illegal Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian protests continued also in the West Bank and in Jerusalem in particular due to ongoing Israeli Judaization policies in the city of Jerusalem. The number of casualties, as you have mentioned earlier, is beyond 290, but 241 of these were unarmed civilians who were protesting near the fence between Gaza and Israeli occupation. And these people were targeted by Israeli snipers, well-trained Israeli snipers using state-of-the-art sophisticated weaponry. They were targeting these unarmed protesters in order to kill. And the large number of casualties and the large number of paramedics and journalists targeted proves that Israeli snipers were actually ordered to shoot to kill these protesters. As long as there is an Israeli occupation, Palestinians will certainly protest and exhibit their hopes for self-determination and freedom, but the Palestinians cannot continue to do this all on their own. International intervention has to come. And I think one of the messages that the Great Return March demonstrations in Gaza is sending to the world is that the international community has to come and intervene. Israel is bluntly violating international laws, international resolutions on a daily basis, and this has to come to an end. It is very unfortunate that the current American administration is giving the cover to the Israeli government, Israeli right-wing government led by Netanyahu, but I would say that international anger over this American endorsement of Israeli occupation policies is also on the rise. We've seen that in the United Nations General Assembly votes on different occasions. The world is upset at what the Israeli governments are doing against the Palestinian civilians, and the trend is still continuing. More and more are joining and backing the Palestinian struggle for freedom. It's a matter of time to see the Israeli occupation come to an end, but I would say if concrete measures were not taken by the international community, more Palestinians will
on that point that you're saying that the international community is coming to realize, would you say that all these protests that happened did not happen in vain, in fact that they did have an impact?
It certainly had an impact, and locally and internationally. Locally, they are expressing their will to continue the struggle. We're talking about 100 years of foreign occupation in Palestine, over 70 years of Israeli occupation. And this long struggle still continues. And every now and then there are new Palestinian uprisings, new waves of resistance. This protest is actually a message to the Palestinians in the first place that struggle has to continue. In 2015, Palestinians in Jerusalem started yet another uprising to stop Israeli practices in the city of Jerusalem. So their brethren in Gaza are only proving the norm. Palestinians will certainly resist any form of occupation. But the other message that these protests is sending is to the international community. It was the international community that aided the South African struggle against apartheid, and it is the international community and international solidarity that will help break Israeli occupation and aid Palestinian struggle for freedom and independence. The number of votes that we have seen over the past few months in the United Nations General Assembly proves that the international community is coming to a realization that the atrocities committed by Israel have to come to an end. It's just a matter of time again. The Palestinians don't think that their sacrifices are going in vain because they see the international solidarity movement on the rise. You look at the BDS movement, for instance, the number of civil society groups, companies, individuals.
At the same point, the BDS movement is trying to be suppressed as well in many parts of the world. So how do the Palestinian people continuously, and I'm trying to understand this from the point of view of the people who come and protest, putting their lives at stake, what drives them? Is it the ethic of hope that a better future will definitely come? Or is it continuously protesting because that is all that is left to do?
It is not one incentive that drives Palestinians to protest. I would say that there is a national ideology that we have to put in sacrifice in order to get our independence, because the sort of occupation we have in Palestine is unique. It's a settler occupation that aims to uproot the local inhabitants, just like what happened in North America and other parts of the world centuries ago. So Palestinians realize that they have a big job to do. So their resistance is certainly going to continue in this direction, but they also realize that sacrificing their life will certainly bring a fruit. The different revolutions that the world has seen in recent history have borne fruits. Yes, they might not have been perfect, but they have resulted in freedom in Algeria, in Vietnam, in South Africa as well. So Palestinians see that. And I won't say that Palestinians are exceptional human beings. Yes, they do feel the pressure of economic, political, and humanitarian pressure that Israel is applying on them. You look at the people in Gaza, 2 million Palestinians living in one of the largest open-air prisons in the world, as described by Israeli journalists like Yuri Admiri. These people are being prevented from their basic human rights. The economy is at the brink of collapse. The Gaza Strip itself is, to some extent, uninhabitable by now because of Israeli policies. You were talking about climate change earlier. Israeli authority that occupies the Gaza Strip and besieges the Gaza Strip is actually intervening to make the situation, the natural situation in Gaza worse. They block underground water from passing to the Gaza Strip. Water that people now dig for in Gaza is salty water. They blockade the Gaza seas. Fishermen cannot go and fish beyond 3 kilometers from the shores of Gaza. And human movement is very difficult. So we're talking about a very dire economic situation in Gaza. And the economic situation in the West Bank and the rest of occupied Palestine is not much better. But it's, I would say, a complex array of reasons.
Muslim, the issues that you've mentioned here are surely impacting everyone across the board, all Palestinians across the board. But recently, we have definitely seen many young icons take front stage. For example, the picture that went viral of a shirtless young boy who was almost 20 years old holding the Palestinian flag. Ahat Tamimi, who joined activism fighting for the Palestinian cause. What can you tell us about the young people moving towards protesting?
I do remember one more icon that every Palestinian by now knows, which is Razan Najjar. Razan Najjar is a young 21 years old Palestinian paramedic who was shot dead by Israeli snipers on the borders of Gaza. She joined every protest for weeks, and she helped many Palestinians with medication. And she was targeted, and her story was documented this last Sunday on New York Times. She was intentionally targeted by the Israeli soldiers surrounding the Gaza Strip. These Palestinian icons are an inspiration to their brethren and to their nation. And without such sacrifices, the struggle won't continue. People like Ahad Tamimi, as young as Ahad, are not afraid to face Israeli soldiers because they know that they are bearing the national struggle and their national rights. These icons are only inspiring their people to continue the struggle. And it is the thousands who are not remembered by media that I believe will drive the change in occupied Palestine. Razan or Ahad or that shirtless young man are the ones who got media attention. But believe me, there are thousands of Palestinians in Israeli prisons demanding the national rights of their people. There are over 7 million Palestinian refugees who continue to seek return to their homeland. There are thousands of Palestinians protesting on a daily basis in the Gaza Strip and in the city of Jerusalem and the rest of Palestine, demanding their national rights. I don't know of any examples in history where the whole nation joins the struggle and it does not succeed in getting its rights tendered. I'm very certain that the Palestinians will be able to get their freedom, but it's a matter of time, and the international community has to intervene to speed it up. We can see that happening in a year or two, but why should we wait for more Palestinian lives to be lost?
Why should so in 2019, and this is my last question to you, do you see the international community intervening into the situation?
I certainly see more international solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. As I mentioned, we have seen that in the United Nations votes, but we're seeing that also in many parts of the world where some left-wing governments, for instance, are recognizing the state of Palestine. We are seeing a rising civil society movement in the United States and elsewhere condemning Israeli occupation and calling for solidarity with the Palestinians. The trend is on the Palestinian side. The change is happening. It's taking time, though. And with this long time, more sacrifices have to be offered by the Palestinians. And I assure everybody that Palestinians, I won't say that have nothing to lose, but the Palestinians are used to do their best to protect their national rights. One of the longest strikes in history was the one that was staged by Palestinians in 1936 against the British occupation. It lasted for 6 months, and it was only broken when regional intervention happened, promising the Palestinians, the end of the British immigration policy.
Thank you so much, Muslim Imran, for joining us. Running out of time, it was a very important protest that you brought to light and a struggle that has been going on for decades that definitely needs more global attention. I'd also like to thank Vimlindu Jha, who joined us earlier, talking about the climate change that is taking place globally. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We hope to see you again tomorrow.